Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, this week we have organized series of lecture on geomorphology, and today we are going to discuss the fundamental concept in geomorphology. There are about 10 concepts on which this discipline is based, and we will try to understand briefly about these concepts so that we can have a kind of framework on which the other topics of geomorphology we will try to understand. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. Abhay Kumar. He works for a leading research institute of the Delhi-based research institute in the area of human development. The name is Institute for Human Development, and he has done a number of work in the area of regional development, urbanization, and a number of articles published in national, international journal, and about dozen books published on the various topics related to this. But his area of specialization is policy research. So certainly he will help us to understand this topic, fundamental concept in geomorphology, and will give a kind of guidance how do we study the geomorphology. So on his behalf, I welcome him for the EduSat lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amrinder ji. Good afternoon, friends. In today's lecture, we are going to study the fundamental concepts of geomorphology. In this particular lecture, we will discuss briefly about each of the concepts. But before I switch over to this fundamental concepts, let me give you a brief background of the discipline. As you know, the term geomorphology is made up of three different words. There is a geos, there is morphos, and then there is a logy. So these three words which constitute geos means earth, morphos means landscapes or the landforms, and the logy is a science. So this particular subject deals with the landforms of Earth's surface, and this particular discipline discusses that. So in this but the term geomorphology is a very recent term. This was not used in earlier. It has started getting more popular after the 19th century. Earlier, this particular discipline was known as physiography, wherein again we were trying to understand the physical landscapes under that particular in that particular discipline. Primarily, this particular discipline, geomorphology, has evolved from the subject called geology, and most of the principles and fundamental concepts which we study in geomorphology is also being studied by the geologists. And the recent trends in geomorphology show that slowly and steadily the discipline of geomorphology is becoming more geological than geographical. So slowly and steadily we are finding that geomorphology is getting more and more technical, and it is getting more and more inclined towards geology rather than geomorphology. So having discussed the very meaning of the term geomorphology and its brief background, let me now come to the 10 different fundamental concepts of geomorphology on the entire discipline of geomorphology is based on. This, though there are different concepts, but these 10 concepts have been given by a great scholar, William Thornbury, and he has written his books Principles of Geomorphology, in which he has discussed all these 10 concepts. These 10 concepts, if we understand properly, it will be very easy for us to understand the discipline of geomorphology. Coming to the first concept, the first concept of, and the first fundamental concept which Thornbury discusses is the same physical processes and laws that operate today operated throughout geological time, although not necessarily always with the same intensity. So here in this particular concept, Thornbury has, this particular concept was first propagated by Hutton, James Hutton, in 1785. This particular concept is also known as uniformitarianism. This uniformitarianism concept has been given by James Hutton, but what Thornbury says in his concept is a little different than what James Hutton has propagated. James Hutton had said that all the geological processes which operate today operated throughout the past with the same intensity as of now, which many scholars has contradicted. They said that though the same geomorphological processes operate today which operated in the past, but the intensity of the operation of the geomorphological processes were not equal in different stages of time. So James Hutton said that these geological processes which operate today operated throughout the past with the same intensity, whereas the same intensity concept has been refuted and contradicted by many scholars, and they said that though the geomorphological processes are similar, but the intensity has varied throughout the geological past. This particular concept is known as uniformitarianism. This uniformitarianism concept was given by James Hutton, later on propagated by his disciple known as John Playfair in 1802. Later on, another great geologist, Charles Lyell, wrote a book, Principles of Geology, in which he has again used the concept of uniformitarianism given by James Hutton, and he popularized this concept of uniformitarianism later on. But as I said, the difference was on the intensity. The intensity, Hutton's emphasized that the intensity was also very similar, which was there in the past, but many of the scholars have refuted this, that the intensity has not remained similar, rather it has varied throughout the past. For instance, they have given the example that the glaciation, which was very much prevalent during the Pleistocene period, is no longer available in the present case. So they said that the glaciers were more active during the Pleistocene period, which is not true today. So this intensity of glaciation has differed. Similarly, there are several other geomorphic processes which has operated with different intensity. For instance, as we have seen, the Cretaceous lava flow, which was there so active during one point of time during the Cretaceous period, is no longer present in the similar intensity today. So that is why scholars have tried to buy the point of the same geomorphological processes which operated in the past also operates today, but the intensity of the operation of these geomorphological processes has varied throughout the time. So this is the basic concept of the uniformitarianism, and later on modified by several other geologists. Similarly, there are numerous examples which shows that though the processes were same, but the intensity differed during different point of time. Hutton was, a great scholar. We said that the nature has a very system of balancing the act. So, according to Hutton, if there is a destruction in the way of earthquake or in the way of diastrophism forms like volcanism and all, these destructions also lead to construction of something. So basically his premise was that destruction leads to construction and construction leads to destruction. So these are the related terminologies, where if a destruction is being done by nature, that means it is leading to construction of some forms. Similarly, if some construction is going on, immediately after that the destruction starts operating. So these processes of different geomorphological processes are there, and they are very much orderly, systematic as well as coherent, and that operate in a very balancing manner. So this was the another principle that that was given by James Hutton, and one of his famous sentence goes as, "No vestige of beginning and no prospects of an end," which means that though he was sure that the same geomorphological processes that operated in the past operate today, but scholars are not very sure that what was the precise time of the beginning of a process and ending of a process. So that was another famous, it has been put in a very famous words by James Hutton, which says that no vestige of beginning and no prospect of an end, which simply says that though we are knowing that the same geomorphological processes operate today which was operating in the past, but the precise timing of the initiation of the processes are not known, and similarly the precise timing of ending of that process is also not known. So there is no vestige of beginning and no prospect of an end. So this was the first geomorphological concept which was given by Thornbury, and this is very important to understand the discipline of geomorphology, because the entire geomorphological system which was operating say millions of years before is also operating today, though the intensity has varied throughout the time. Now the second fundamental concept says that the geological structure is a dominant control factor in the evolution of landforms and is reflected in them. So the first principle was on the geomorphological process and is repetition, whereas the second fundamental concept of geomorphology stressed the factor of structure. Now you know that William Morris Davies has given the concept of structure, process and stage, in which he has kept the structure on the first stage. So structure is a very, very dominant factor in the evolution of landform. Similarly, this is a dominant, not only a dominant control factor, but is also reflected in the landforms created by them. So suppose there is a structure, so different kind of structures. So if a structure is of very hard rocks, then the landscape is of a different kind, where if the structure is of a soft rocks, then the landforms will be of different kinds. Moreover, the erosional processes that takes over on the different structural formats of the landscapes also differ. So one thing that is again here to be noted, that William Morris Davies has given three terms: structure, process and stage, but later on again the stage factor was relatively doubtful, but the factors of structure and process was completely bared by all the other scholars. Similarly, now what do we mean by structure in here? Now a structure is the physical and chemical processes of the stratification of the rocks in the earth. Now this includes many things, many factors related to the structure. That includes rock attitudes, presence or absence of joints, bedding planes, faults and folds, rock massiveness, physical hardness of the constituent minerals of the rock, the susceptibility of the mineral constituents to chemical reaction, alteration, permeability and impermeability. Structure also relates to the stratigraphic implications, and knowledge of the structure of a region implies an appreciation of rock sequence both in outcrop as well as in the subsurface area. So a rock may be resistant to one process and non-resistant to another. So it's the complete physical and chemical processes that operates on the rock and the constituent minerals of the rock, the types of rocks, these are all included in this structure. Also the stratification in the ground, whether it is outcrop, whether it is subsurface. This is again, there is another point, like one should not make mistake of concluding that where the structure or the effect of geological structure is not dominant, it does not or it should not be meant that its influence is lacking in that particular structure. Though it may be subsided, but the dominant role of the structure will remain there. So this is the another important geomorphic concept which was given to understand the discipline of geomorphology, and which emphasizes on the role of a structure in the landforms. The third geomorphic concept is, to a large degree, the Earth's surface possesses relief because the geomorphic processes operate at differential rates. Now, why does this relief, we observe relief on the Earth's surface? We observe it because there is a differential rates of geomorphic processes. We will understand what are the geomorphic processes that operate. We have understood the structure. Now, we will also understand the geomorphic process, but in this particular concept, we are just trying to emphasize that the landforms occur because of the differential rates of the geomorphic processes that operate. So, the main reason or the main factor will, again, as I said, that it is lithology or a structure, but these are exposed to varying degrees of resistance to the gradational processes. Now, except for recent diastrophism, areas where we have a high topographically high region, that means that area has a structure or the stratigraphy of a hard rocks, whereas the area where the topographic are low, that means the subsurface or the structure of that area is of soft rocks, and that is why weak rocks, or that is why it has gone under the degradational processes. Other than the lithology and structure, the local intensity of particular processes such as the climates, vegetation, etc. also matters a lot. So, after structure, there is another dominant factor which leads to the landform development is the climatic as well as the vegetational factors. Among the climatic factors, we have temperature, moisture, altitude, exposure, topographic configuration, and amount and type of vegetal cover. The microclimatic conditions relating to the precipitation and evaporation, soil moisture, intensity and insolation, temperature fluctuation, etc. also plays a vital role in the formation of the landforms. So, this is the third concept which emphasizes that landforms takes place because there is a differential rates of the geomorphic processes operating on them. Coming to the fourth concept, the fourth concept says that geomorphic processes leave their distinctive imprints upon landforms, and each geomorphic process develops its own characteristics assemblage of landforms. So, there are two things here in this particular concept. One, that geomorphic processes leave their distinctive imprint upon landforms. So, if you are getting a particular type of landform, that means you can identify that particular type of geomorphic processes has taken over that particular landscape. Secondly, each geomorphic process develops its own characteristics assemblage of landforms. So, if there is a particular type of geomorphic process, it will lead to a particular kind of landforms. Now, to understand that what are the geomorphic processes, now geomorphic processes can be divided into two parts. One, that is endogenetic process, and another is exogenetic process. Endogenetic processes and exogenetic processes applies to the many physical and chemical ways by which Earth's surface undergo modification. So, these processes, endogenetic as well as exogenetic processes, operate together to develop a particular kind of landscape. So, now let us understand this, what is endogenetic factors and what are the exogenetic factors. Endogenetic factors is also known as hypogenetic factors or hypogene. These endogenetic factors, which means that the factors originating from the inner part or the subsurface of the earth. That means what are those kind of processes? That those processes are diastrophism, volcanism, etc. This diastrophism and volcanism leads to again two different kinds of processes. One is epirogenetic processes, another is orogenetic processes. Now, what is this epirogenetic processes and orogenetic processes? Epirogenetic processes are those processes which leads to the submergence and emergence of a land surface, whereas orogenetic factors leads to the folding and warping of the earth surfaces. So, when there is a folding, faulting or warping, faulting, folding and warping, That means those are the orogenetic factors, and when there is emergence or submergence of the landforms, that leads to that is called as epirogenetic factors. So these are the two different factors, epirogenetic factors and orogenetic factors, that comes under the endogenetic factors. Now what are the exogenetic factors? Exogenetic factors are also called as epigene or epigenetic factors. Epigenes, which means the weathering, mass wasting and erosion. These factors are aggradational and degradational processes. These are operating at the outer surface of the earth crust. Endogenetic factors operate in the subsurface of the earth crust, and that is why we call it as endogenetic processes, whereas the exogenetic factors, which is also known as epigene, is operating at the outcrop or the outer layer of the earth surface on the landscapes, and they are mostly of two different types. One is degradational and another is aggradational. Now what is this degradational and aggradational? Degradational processes are those processes which leads to the erosion or weathering or mass wasting of the developed landforms. So the moment a landform develops, the erosional, degradational as well as mass wasting starts operating in those, whereas aggradational processes are those that once the degradation, erosion and mass wasting takes place, the sediments of those degradational processes are being deposited by these aggradational processes, and they are again forming a different kind of landforms. So these are the degradational and aggradational processes. Now these endogenetic processes are also known as constructional processes, whereas exogenetic processes are also known as destructional processes. Endogenetic processes tend to build up or restore areas which have been worn down by the exogenetic processes. So what does this endogenetic processes? Once the area is degraded, eroded, now endogenetic processes acts and again it develops certain landforms on that. The moment certain landforms develops, again the exogenetic factors start working on that, and again it reduces to the plane surface. So a mountain is built up, and now the mountain is built up because of these endogenetic factors, but as soon as mountain builds up, the exogenetic factors operate on them, and again it leads to the planation of the surface, and finally what we find is a plane surface. So this continuous process of endogenetic and exogenetic processes leads to different kind of formation of the landscapes, and we also find different landforms of different types because of these endogenetic and exogenetic processes. And that is why it says that geomorphic processes leave their distinctive imprints upon landforms, and each geomorphic process develops its own characteristic assemblage of landforms. Because of this distinctiveness, because the typical kind of a particular kind of geomorphic process leads to a particular kind of landform development, there we find we can also make a genetic classification of landforms based on these processes. So if a landform is based, a landform is based on the endogenetic process, we can call it the landforms based on the endogenetic processes. Similarly, if a landform is based on the exogenetic factors, we call it landform. So we can have a genesis classification of landforms on the basis of these processes. And even William Morris Davies has tried to do this kind of classification of landforms on the basis of these endogenetic and exogenetic processes. Now, it is convenient in discussing the origin of landforms to consider each geomorphic process separately. However, most landscapes are the products of a group of processes. This is also an important point to understand, that though we try to understand each landforms with the help of a particular kind of processes, but it is to be noted down that any of the landform is not necessarily a product of only one geomorphic process. There may be different geomorphic processes that have operated on that particular landforms, and the landform is a result of not a single geomorphic process, but maybe multiple geomorphic processes. So therefore, for the sake of a study, for the sake of understanding, it may be very easy or simple to understand, but in reality, one landform is made up of different kind of geomorphic processes rather than only one geomorphic processes. Coming to the concept number 5, fundamental principles or fundamental concepts of geomorphology. Again, these concepts I am discussing given by Thornbury. Now concept 5 says that as the different erosional agents act upon the earth's surface, there is produced an orderly sequence of landforms. Now we need to understand this process very carefully, because this particular concept is related to William Morris Davies concept of geomorphic cycle. Now we know that William Morris Davies has given a concept of geomorphic cycle in which he has tried to categorize the different types of landscapes based on their concomitant stages, and he called the stages as youth stage, mature stage as well as old stage. Now he has given a great deal of, he has discussed in great length about the youth, the characteristics of the youth stage and their resultant landscapes, the characteristics of the mature stage and their resultant landscapes, and the characteristics of the old stage and their resultant landscapes. But his major point was that each stages of these landscape development produce an orderly sequence of landscape. Now this particular concept has again been debated a lot, because Davies has given and stressed much on the stages of the development, whereas not all the scientists are convinced that these stages are definite in any geomorphological cycle. So there are several scholars which have tried to discuss the Daviesian concept of geomorphic cycle, but they have tried to understand and they have tried to refute the argument that these stages are, it is must in any geomorphic cycle. They have tried to refute this particular concept, and this particular concept, they said that it is though very useful at elementary level of understanding or understanding the elementary level of the landscape development, but the moment you go for a deeper probe on the landscape development, if the moment you go for a deeper understanding of the landscape development, these processes or these sequential landforms cease to operate, and there are several factors that emerge in between which restricts the development or which restricts the development of the sequential or orderly forms of the landforms. Now they said that whether the basic contention on these stages was that they said that the distinctive and expectable characteristics at each stage of development is doubtful, and there lies the greater skepticism that it's not necessary that each stages will have the similar kind of landforms throughout the globe, because later on Davies was also criticized that this particular Davies has studied in a very limited area of the United States, and that therefore whatever the concept that he has given, it is restricted to that particular area, though it cannot be scaled up to the entire world topography or entire world landscape. And therefore there was a major cause of debate as well as doubt or skepticism on the stages of development, because scientists try to argue that these stages are not intermittent, and there are several factors which leads to the breaking of the stages in between. There is another concept given by Davies was peneplain, which is the ultimate land features of the old stage of his sequential order, and this peneplain concept was also criticized by many scholars, saying that peneplain is not the final outcome of any geomorphic process. There may be several other regions because of which the geomorphic process may get disturbed in between, and peneplain may not result at the end. So this was another process, which was another factor of criticism on the Davishian concept. There was another point of criticism here was on the term used as cycle, because many scholars did not agree that this cycle, geomorphic cycle or the cycle of landscape development is really a really developed in a cyclic process. Why? Because for one reason, the geomorphic landscape development may not complete the complete cycle. But since people tried to give several other terminologies on this, but they were not able to find a good terminology also in this, and therefore the concept of cycle remained in the discipline of geomorphology, and it is still being used. But there were several scholars who have doubted the use of this term cycle, because the cyclic nature of the landscape development was not always necessary in different parts of the world. So that was another factor. The term does not mean orderly and sequential development, but there will be no certainty that topography of another region in the same stage of development has fully comparable characteristics. So if you are comparing the two different regions which have undergone the similar geomorphic processes, you may still find variations in the two different stages, and therefore there are certain other factors also which leads to the disruption of the process or the disruption of this geomorphic cycle. And those four factors which we have already discussed, they are geology, structure, climate varying conditions including precipitation and temperature, as well as the vegetal cover of a landform. So these different factors also leads to the disruption of the cyclical concept of the geomorphic cycle. Similarity in the topographic details of the two regions would be expectable. If you want to expect that the two regions should produce a similar kind of landscape, then it is only possible if the initial surface, lithology, structure, climate and diastrophic conditions are all same. So if you want to compare the two similar kind of different regions where that similar kind of landscape development has undergone or has undertaken, then you need to have in those two regions similar structure, similar climate, similar diastrophic conditions and similar initial surface, similar lithology, and then only you can find similar kind of landform development in the two different regions, which is not always the case. Two regions cannot be of a similar form, two regions cannot have the similar structure, climate, diastrophic condition. It is very difficult to find these two different varying regions in a very similar form. There is also this concept of time which Davis has used was very much relative. It is not absolute. So in relative means that the concept of time is not fixed, that it is from this particular point of time to this particular point of time. It may vary, according to the different factors that is operating in those regions. So that is why it is also being criticized that this time concept in Davishian geomorphic cycle is very much relative. It is not absolute. And there is also no implications that two areas are in considerable stage of development have required the same length of time for their attainment. So this is another factor which needs to be noted, that if the two areas are there where the similar kind of geomorphic processes are taking up, it is not necessary that the two regions will take the similar time span for a particular landform development, because of the varying factors that I discussed about the structure, lithology, climate, all these working in those two areas. And that is why it's the time span for attaining those landform will be different in the two regions. Other than this complete cycle or the geomorphic cycle of Davis, there is another concept developed was a partial cycle. which many scholars say that it is more a reality than the Davishian concept cycle, because Davis tried to put the entire landscape development in a cyclic form, whereas many of the structures, as when they studied the different parts of the world, they found that not all the regions have undergone the complete cyclical stage of the development of the landforms, and therefore that it is the partial cycle which is more important in these areas than the full cycle that operates in the case of the Davishian geomorphic cycle. So they emphasized the role on this partial cycle. Now coming to the sixth concept of Davishian fundamental concept, the sixth concept of the sixth fundamental concept says that complexity of geomorphic evolution is more common than simplicity. So this complexity of geomorphic evolution is more a reality than its simplicity. It simply means that a landscape development, a landscape formation is a complex process rather than very simple process. And Davis was also criticized because Davis has tried to give a very simple, simple theory of landform development, which says that it is a cycle, it goes from youth to mature to, but as we will see that there are several processes which interrupt in between, and it may not allow the cycle to complete, and it leads to the partial cycle. So they say that the complexity of a geomorphic evolution is more common than its simplicity, simply meaning that any geomorphic landscape development is more complex than simple. Now there is a scientist, geologist called Herberg, which in 1952 tried to classify different kind of landforms on the basis of the geomorphic processes or the geomorphic cycle that is presented, that is given. He tried to classify these geomorphic landscapes into 4 different types. One is simple landscape, another is compound landscape, third is monocyclic landscape, and fourth is exhumed or resurrected landscapes. Now let us understand what are these simple, compound, monocycle and exhumed landscapes. Now simple landscapes are those landscapes where only one geomorphological processes have taken place. So simple landscape development or simple landscape development means there is only one geomorphic processes are operated, whereas when it is a compound landscape, that means there are more than one geomorphic processes that has operated in that particular region. There is another concept of monocyclic and multicyclic, wherein he says that a monocyclic landscapes are those landscapes where one complete cycle of landscape development has taken place, whereas multicyclic landscape development is that it is not one cycle, but there are many landscape cycle that has taken place. There is another category called as resurrected or exhumed landscapes, which means these landscapes were formed much earlier, but later on because of the erosional degradational processes, these structure which was formed much earlier now again have come into the picture, now has again been resurrected, has again been exhumed, has again come out or came out in the open, and those kind of landscapes are called as exhumed or resurrected landscapes. So Herberg has tried to classify landscapes on these different processes, and he tried to say that those simple landscapes or monocyclic landscapes are very rare. We find more and more of the compound as well as multicyclic landscapes in reality. He also said that both a monocyclic landscapes and multicyclic landscapes may be either single or compound. So if suppose there is a landscape of monocyclic nature where one single geomorphic cycle has taken place, there is a possibility that it may be a simple or it may be compound. That means in that particular cycle there might be only one geomorphic processes have operated, or there might be more than one geomorphic processes have operated during that one cycle. Similarly, in the multicyclic concept also, in the multicyclic classification of landforms also, there can be a simple or compound, which means in multicyclic process also there may be only one geomorphic process is operated in all the cycles, or there may be more than one geomorphic process is operated in that particular cycle. Similarly, there was another classification called as polyclimatic landscapes, which simply means that you have a different types of climates, and different types of climates leads to the different kinds of landscapes, and this is what we call as polyclimatic landscapes. And now, as I discussed, exhumed or resurrected landscapes are those landscapes which are either buried or later exposed. Coming to the fundamental concepts number 7, which says that little of the Earth's topography is older than Tertiary and most of it is no older than Pleistocene. Now this is very interesting. Now whatever landscape that we see in present times is not much older. This is what this particular concept tries to say, that in geomorphical studies whatever landscapes that we try to see is not necessarily the older landscape, because as we know the older landscape goes under different kind of erosional processes, and therefore the old and older geomorphic landscapes are no longer available. What we see today by our naked eyes in today's terms, it is only the recent landscapes that was formed very recently. By recent we means that it is no older than Pleistocene. So most of the landscapes are more recent than the Pleistocene age. Now Ashley was a scientist, and he said it very categorically that 90% of our present land surface have developed post-tertiary. So tertiary is the most recent time scan in the geological chronology, and Ashley says that most of this 90% of the landscape that we see today is post-tertiary, means that has developed after tertiary period, and 99% of these landscapes are middle Miocene age. So they are all very recent, and that is why this says that little of the Earth's surface topography is older than tertiary, and most of it is no older than the Pleistocene. So these are the most recent, most latest landscape development. Now, but it is to be noted that the 10% that Ashley has left, or 10% landscape that he is mentioning about, that it is not it is not very recent. That means those are the old geological structures which is made up of basaltic or lava eruptions, and because of that those are very hard rocks, and they have not been modified, or it has remained as it is, as we see in the Deccan Plateau and all. And therefore we say that it is of course true that many geological are very old. They are much older than the topographic features developed upon them, but those geomorphic structure that we are discussing is in the subsurface. What we see on the outer outcrop or the outer surface is basically the recent landforms developed. For example, they have said that the Himalayas were probably the first Himalayas mountain that we see today is first folded in Cretaceous period, and later in Eocene and Miocene, which are all in the tertiary phase, but their present elevation not attained until the Pliocene, and most of the topographic detail that we see is Pleistocene or later in age. So even the Himalaya mountain that we see is of a very recent origin in chronological terms, and we see that it is mostly developed in the tertiary phase of the chronology. Coming to the 8th geomorphical concepts, which says that proper interpretation of present day landscape is impossible without a full appreciation of the manifold influences of the geologic and climatic changes during the Pleistocene. So Pleistocene was a very important period in order to understand the geomorphology, or in order to understand the landscape of the present times. During the Pleistocene period, there was a great glacialization of the almost entire world. It says that the 10 million square mile of the area was affected because of this glaciation during the Pleistocene period, and its impact was almost the entire globe. Such was the massive scale of glaciation that took place during the Pleistocene period, that its impact was felt throughout the globe. The entire earth was affected because of that glaciation, and its area, it is it was estimated that it has spread over 10 million square mile. Now, because of this glaciation, evidence suggests that this because of this glaciation, the sea or the ocean that we see today, the water was extracted from those sea and oceans, and because of which there was a reduction in the sea level by 300 feet to 500 feet during that point of time. So, during Pleistocene time, when this glaciation process took place, the sea level has declined by 300 to 500 feet down. And later on, when again the ice started melting up, the coral, in the submarine environment, the coral was there, and since this chilled cold water was again returned back to sea and ocean, because of that the coral was affected tremendously. And that is what it says, that the proper interpretation of present day landscape is very, if you want to interpret the present day landscape, it is very important to understand the climatic changes that has taken place during the Pleistocene time, the great ice age, the great glaciation that took place during that particular point of time. It is said that the area that we see temperate regions today were permafrost at that point of time. Similarly, the area that we see arid or semi-arid today were humid and humid climates during the glacial ages. There are numerous examples and there are numerous evidences that is suggesting these kind of facts. Now, other than glaciation, many areas had diastrophism which started during the Pliocene and continued in Pleistocene and even into the recent. For example, we can understand the formation of the Rocky Mountains in the on the border of the Pacific Ocean. So, if we want to understand the current day landscape, it is very important for the geomorphologist or those who study geomorphology to understand the climatic processes that has taken place during the Pleistocene period, the glaciation, the ices that has taken place during the Pleistocene period. Coming to the ninth concept tells us that an appreciation of world climates is necessary to a proper understanding of varying importance of the different geomorphic process. Up till now, we have seen in all the 8 concepts, we have tried to understand the geomorphic processes, the structure and the stage, the 3 trio of the trio given by Davis, wherein we have tried to understand how the structure plays its important role in the landscape development. We have also tried to see what kind of geomorphic processes operate on the landscape development, and we have also tried to understand the role that a stage has played and the criticism that has come on the level of the stage or the time that any geomorphic landscape requires to form. Other than these 3 processes, we must appreciate the role of the world climate. These world climates, by world climate we mean at temperature and precipitation, different forms of temperature and different forms of precipitation. So, if we want to understand the present day landscape, we need to understand how the world climate, climates are, how the precipitation and temperature differs in different parts of the world, and there are also indirect controls because of this temperature and precipitation. They are the vegetal covers, because we know that the vegetation is just what is a reflection of what the climate and temperature and precipitation is there in that particular region. So, indirect effect is the vegetal cover, whereas the direct effect is the different forms of the precipitation and temperature. Now, direct controls on the temperature and precipitations also include as the amount and kind of precipitation, its intensity, the relation between precipitation and evaporation, daily ranges of temperature, fall below freezing point, depth of frost penetration, wind velocities, direction of wind direction. So, we know that wind, precipitation, if there was a time when the areas got continuous precipitation on this Earth's surface during the just immediately after the Pleistocene period time. So the time and duration of the precipitation and their daily range of temperature. If a range of temperature it varies a lot, then that also leads to that also affects the landscape development. How the land is frozen and again defreezed, how the land is permafrosted or not permafrosted, how the wind velocities are there in that particular. So we need to understand all these climatic factors in order to understand the landscape development. So other than the structure, process and stage, we must appreciate the role of the climatic factors here, which is also a very vital important factor in understanding the landscape development. Now other factors relating to these climatic factors are how long the ground is frozen, exceptionally heavy rainfalls and their frequency, season of maximum rainfall, frequency of freeze and thaw, slopes facing the sun and those not so exposed, windward and leeward sides of topographic features, etc. Now most of these basic concepts of geomorphology have evolved in humid temperate region. We need to understand that whatever the landscape we see on the Earth's surface, it is mostly formed in the humid temperate regions. So we have a different kind of landforms in these humid temperate regions. These are the 9 different geomorphological concepts that we understand, and there is a final 10th concept which says that geomorphology, although concerned primarily with the present day landscapes, attains its maximum usefulness by historical extension. So though we have seen that the geomorphological landscape that we study today is of a very recent times, but if we appreciate the history of that particular landscape, then only we will be able to understand properly the landscape evolution. So basically what we try to understand that the current present day landscape is only what we have seen or what has been modified in today's time. But prior to that we have seen that the same landscapes were in a different landforms were in a different format, and the structure, process and stage, all these have differed during the different point of time, and because of this during the different point of time we have also tried to see that there are different kinds of landscapes. So if we want to understand and appreciate the current day landscape, we need to appreciate or we need to understand the geological history, then only we will be able to understand the geomorphology subject in its totality. So these are the 10 different fundamental concepts of geomorphology, which I will suggest every student of geomorphology to read properly, understand properly. If once it is understood properly, the entire discipline of geomorphology will become very easy to understand, and the entire discipline of geomorphology will be very easy to comprehend. So here I will end, and if I'll see if there are questions.
Can you suggest some book list so that they will could read those books and
yes
get
I will suggest you must read William Thornbury book on the principles of geomorphology. That is a primary book that I will suggest you to go through. Rest other textbooks of P. Dayal, Savinder Singh, these are other textbooks where you can find everything together. Those are the textbooks, but if you want to study in,
we will discuss it, but before that we take a question from Jammu and Kashmir. Good afternoon friend, please ask your question.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, please ask your question.
Sir?
जी सवाल पूछिए. Okay, got disconnected. Okay, Savinder Singh and other book we were talking about.
Savinder Singh and P. Dayal has also written textbooks on the geomorphology which you can read. Those are good books, but they have tried to compile different books together. They have tried to give you in a one book format, so you can study that. But if you want to study some of the classic books, you must read this Thornbury. Then you can also study the principles of geology. You also need to understand the geological factors that is related. So if you are, I'm sure these lectures are being read by or being listened by the geographers in the country. But I will suggest that once you want to get into this field, you must understand the subject of geology also properly, because once you get into this discipline, yeah, there
we have a call from Bihar. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Yes. Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Please ask your question. सवाल पूछिए जी, सवाल पूछिए
सर। ये जो मतलब कि लावा निकलता है जैसे, है ना, तो उसका क्या कारण है? वो मतलब क्यों बाहर आता है, मतलब पृथ्वी के अंदर
लावा बाहर आने का क्या कारण है?
बेसिकली लावा एक डायस्ट्रोफिज्म प्रोसेस है जो हमें पता है. our earth crust inside is very hot, and because of this diastrophism, when land, we know the crust is moving and diastrophism takes place at different places, and because of that the inner core, which is very hot, which is very dense, that that is, if you want to understand this earth structure, the entire earth structure from core to land surface, you will understand that the core is very hot, and where there are different things in the different constituent minerals are in the melted form, and because of this diastrophism, that those melted forms comes out and that spreads all over the land surface.
Okay. So this is the region hot से cold की ओर.
Yes, it relates to certain particular kind of regions where the diastrophism, where the diastrophism factor is more and more important. But so in the where the volcanoes are there, you cannot find those factors very much relevant where these Himalaya mountains are there. So this is only relevant, and this is more important in the area where the volcanoes are there, the area where there are more and more diastrophic activities taking place.
Okay. So any approaches or any point which need to be taken care while studying, while to these concepts?
Yeah.
What are the concepts which are not being generally understood by the students?
Actually the fundamental concept that I have discussed today is largely the concepts given by Thornbury only, but there are several other scholars which have given their own fundamental concepts, so you can also study those, like Strabo has there are certain other scholars have given their fundamental concepts. For instance, I'm just recalling the name. There's a scholar called Stibbs who has given his some of the other fundamental concepts. So you can study those fundamental concepts also.
But these are the major 10
these
concepts.
are the major 10 factors, on which the entire geomorphic theories, concepts are based on. So if you want to understand the discipline of geomorphology, you need to understand the structure, you need to understand the processes, you need to understand the stages. You have questions?
No, so we will wind up now because we don't have time. So well friends, I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. Abhay Kumar for giving such a wonderful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.